Chapter 4. Sorry about the delay. Where was I? Oh yeah, the fairies. Nothing else happened that night. If I had to guess, I think they gave us a little downtime after that last one. When I finally felt good enough to get out of bed the next morning, I wandered out into the hall smelling the unmistakable odor of pancakes and coffee. Excited by the thought of it, I hurried downstairs. When I got to the bottom, my jaw dropped. Everything was back to normal. The furniture looked like nothing had ever happened. Piles of fairy corpses were gone, and there wasn't a drop of blood anywhere. Speechless, I stood there for a long time, looking at everything. Before I could utter a word, Jack came strolling out of the kitchen carrying a plate piled high with pancakes, dripping syrup and butter. Still chewing his last mouthful, he grinned. Gotta love pancakes. I couldn't argue with that one. When I got to the kitchen myself, I piled a few on a plate and poured myself a cup of coffee. Stirring in my 2 spoons of sugar, no cream. I stood there thinking about the night before. I was starting to lose perspective. The days felt short, and the nights seemed to last forever. I couldn't remember what day of the week it was. When I asked either Paula or Jack, they would say different things. Jack said it was Thursday, and Paula said it was Monday. Even then, neither of them could be completely sure. As I took my first sip looking out at the backyard, I couldn't shake the feeling someone was watching me. I hadn't been standing there long when Paula came in.
Hey Cal, who made pancakes?
Shrugging my shoulders, I told her I didn't know. She just laughed, shook her head, and fixed herself a plate.
I've been thinking about this all night,
she said and set her plate down.
I think they're drugging us. That's the only way I can explain any of this. We have to be hallucinating. Maybe they're pumping it through the vents. That's why we can't go out during events.
As she reached for the syrup, there was a loud thunk from something smacking to the glass and sticking. We both jumped and looked to see what appeared to be a giant spitball stuck to the patio door. Paula tilted her head back and covered her eyes, letting out a disgusted sigh.
Can we please just have one day without this ball?
There was another thunk from a second wad slapping against the window. The kitchen door swung open as Jack came in, still sucking syrup off his fingertips. Having a party without me? Where's the coffee? Strolling over to the sink to wash his plate, he stopped and looked at the 2 huge wads stuck to the glass. Oh shit, he muttered, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked scared. He didn't say another word. Quickly dropping his dish, shattering it, he took off for the front room. Paula and I rushed in to see him picking up that stone off the coffee table while watching the windows. What's going on, Jack? He didn't answer. Clutching the stone, he kept searching for whatever it was he was trying to spot. Then he muttered, Yara, just before another wad smacked against the glass.
What the fuck is a yara?
Paula demanded, clearly frustrated by the situation. Jack still wasn't really responding to either of us. Motioning for us to look towards the glass, he slowly started backing towards the kitchen. That is a yara, he grumbled under his breath as he got closer to the door. It was the strangest looking thing I had ever seen. It had reddish-brown skin, and its oversized mouth was toothless, dripping drool as it opened wide to let out a loud croak. It had a mohawk of bristly brown hair that ran between its beady yellow eyes and down to the back. The creature's arms were too long for its body. It dragged its knuckles across the ground as it moved. Its long, awkward-looking fingers were tipped with bulbous suction cups that stuck to the glass as it waddled around. Paula and I stood there watching the yara move around the yard, croaking, till the sound of the kitchen door closing snapped us out of it. Jack was gone. I rushed into the kitchen to find him pulling every big knife he could from the drawers. Holding a meat cleaver in one hand and a stone in the other, he stopped when he saw me standing in the doorway. "Don't let him spit on you, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep," he said, rushing over to turn off the lights.
"They're climbing up the side of the house!"
Paula yelled, bursting into the kitchen. Grabbing a knife from the counter, she angrily questioned why Jack hadn't told us about the creatures sooner. Jack scoffed, waving his rock in my direction while looking at Paula. "I told Greenie all about the island. It's not my fault he didn't tell you." The look she gave me made me wince a little. "Shit, I'm sorry. I don't listen to half the stuff Jack talks about." Now, they were both giving me a sour look. Throwing up both hands and shrugging my shoulders, I quickly changed the subject. "How do we stop these things, Jack?" Shaking his head and brushing past me, he grumbled, "You figure it out." For a second I thought about locking myself in the basement, but with my luck I'd end up like Fred, or worse. Picking up the butcher's knife off the counter, I joined the others who were now standing in the center of the living room, looking up at the ceiling. I didn't get a word out before Jack shushed me while pointing up. "They're inside," he whispered as the floorboards above us creaked and groaned under the Yara's weight. Jack slowly moved across the room and took cover behind the couch. "Get behind something, hurry!" A thunderous croaking sound filled the room. It was too late. Paula and I dove for cover behind the couch with Jack as two Yara came bounding down the stairs, landing with a loud smack against the wood floor. These things aren't that big. They only stand about 5 feet tall, but they're super heavy, which makes them slow. Turning to face me, Jack whispered, "Greenie, pop your head up and get a look. Tell me where they are." I should have known better. The second I popped my head up, something splattered against my forehead with so much force I was thrown backwards to the wall where I stuck. Jack exploded with laughter, and Paula covered her mouth, trying to contain it. "Get it off me!" I screamed, clawing at the now hardening mass, getting my hands stuck in it as well. "Fuck! Help me, goddammit!" Jack was almost crying, laughing, shaking his head, motioning his hands for me to stop. "Calm down, Greenie. We have to get rid of these two first. Hey, Paula, pop your head up and—" "Hell no, you do it!" Still laughing, Jack popped his head up from behind cover quickly, narrowly avoiding a second wad as it zipped past him. He yelled, "Now!" Then jumped up and ran towards the two Yara with Paula following his lead. From where I was, I couldn't see anything. I heard Jack yelling, "You gotta get behind him! Don't let him touch your skin!" Then screams, cursing, and furniture breaking. I squatted there, stuck to the wall, till I started hearing a low groaning sound from my left, near the kitchen. Shifting my eyes to get a look, I saw another Yara peeping at me through the slightly open door. It was less than half the size of the other two, but that didn't make it any less terrifying. Slowly easing its way out of the kitchen, it started waddling towards me. I tried yelling to the others, but with all the commotion, they couldn't hear me. All I could do was kick at it, which turned out to be a huge mistake. The second it was close enough, I swung my foot as hard as I could. In a flash, its tongue darted out, wrapping around my ankle. Fucking thank God I had pants on. Pulling my lower leg into its mouth. I thrashed around, trying to kick it off my leg. Even at that size, the little shit was incredibly heavy. I could feel my shoe getting wet. Planting my other foot on its face, I pushed with all my might, creating a slurping suction sound as I finally managed to pry that thing off my leg. The Yara rolled over backwards, coming up on its feet, and lashed out with its tongue again, this time wrapping around both of my ankles. The only thing keeping my legs out of its mouth was the wad of spit anchoring me to the fucking wall. It pulled, forcing my body to be suspended. I could hear the sheetrock starting to crack as it violently yanked its head back, trying to pull me free. "Oh shit, Cal!" Paula screamed, while rushing over carrying a knife. With a single swing, she chopped through the Yara's tongue, releasing me just as the sheetrock gave in and I crashed to the ground. I sat up in time to see her sink the knife into that thing's skull, pinning it to the floor. It made a gurgling sound and flailed its arms around, before finally going still. Exhausted, Paula slumped down and sat on the floor.
Holy shit. Jesus, Jack. Please tell me those were the worst things from that island.
From somewhere on the other side of the room, I heard Jack laugh. Ha! Not even close. But since there's no trees in here, I think we're okay. It took the rest of the morning to get me out of that mess. Around noon, we were all watching a movie when the white van pulled up outside, speakers coming to life as it slowed to a stop.
Attention all the remaining participants. 72 hours remain for this event. For the next 30 minutes, you are free to leave your homes to collect supplies from the van. 29 minutes remain.
Jumping out of our seats, we rushed to the front door and burst out onto the front lawn. I didn't think any of us cared about the supplies at that moment. Getting fresh air for the first time in days felt more important. Standing there in the sunshine, I started looking around until I spotted the Hill family coming from the red house. All four of them looked pretty rough, but they were alive. I instantly got a bad vibe off the father when we all met up at the van. He paused, looking at the three of us, with his wife and daughter standing behind him, giving us the evil eye. "Afternoon, everyone. We're the Hills. I'm Arthur, and this is my wife Justine, and our daughters Allison and Janice. I see you've formed an alliance with your housemate and Jack." The expression on his face when he said Jack's name gave me the feeling they had history, but before I could respond, I heard his voice from behind me. "Fuck off, Arthur." "Hello, Justine. You are a sight for sore eyes." I glanced back to see Paula covering her mouth while heading for the van, and I followed her lead. When we were out of earshot, I asked her what was going on, but she didn't know. While we were stuffing supplies into plastic bags, I noticed a medium-sized red box sitting off to the side. Sliding it over, I opened it. Inside was a revolver and a box of ammunition. "Oh shit," Paula whispered, peeking over my shoulder. "You gonna take it, right?" Moving as fast as I could, I took the gun out of the box and slipped it with our supplies, then did the same with the ammo. By this point, Jack and Arthur were arguing. I quickly grabbed our bags and went inside to stash the gun. I didn't know where else to put it but in with the, bodies in the closet. I made it back outside in time to see Jack headbutt Arthur in the nose, causing an all-out brawl to erupt. I'm not sure how Paula wound up fighting Justine, but I stood there watching for a second, hoping for a wardrobe malfunction. In the commotion, I hadn't paid much attention to Allison and Janice. Then I got blindsided by one of them cracking me in the back of the head with a branch off a nearby tree. The impact barely made me stumble, but it stung like hell. When I got my balance, I spun around to see one of them rushing into the house as the other prepared to bash me again. I am not proud of this next part, but she attacked me first, and I could tell she was trying to really hurt me. I grabbed the branch and punched her in the nose, causing her to stagger back before I kicked her in the stomach, knocking her on her ass. As I rushed past her, heading inside, she tripped me and scrambled to her feet, scooping up the branch. The little witch brought that thing down across the small of my back before I could do anything about it. I rolled to my back as she brought the branch down again, missing this time, giving me a chance to drive my heel into her knee. There was a loud snap. She screamed and dropped to the ground while I jolted to my feet and made a dash for the house. I could hear glass breaking and things being knocked off shelves as I stepped through the door. Following the noise, I found her in the kitchen. The moment I stepped in, she turned her attention to me, grabbed a knife, and started yelling.
Where is it? I know you took it! Give it back!
Stepping to my left, I tried to put some distance between us, but she wasn't having it. She quickly took a step while screaming for me to give the gun back. I told her I didn't have it. She then lunged at me, swinging the blade, but then an alert from the van outside stopped her in her tracks.
You now have 5 minutes. All participants return to your designated sectors.
The distraction was just long enough for me to grab the coffee pot and smash it against the side of her head. She staggered to the right, dropping the knife, and tumbled through the swinging door into the next room. Picking up the blade she dropped, I pushed open the door to see her scrambling out of the house. I won't lie and say I wasn't relieved. Hurting a kid like that, though, I'm not proud of it. Taking a seat on the couch, I vegged out for a second till Jack and Paula came inside. Still excited from the fight, Jack strolled over to the bar, while Paula took off for the restroom. Grabbing bottles of tequila and mezcal, he started making a drink. Setting them down, he rushed to the kitchen while yelling out, "You're gonna love this one, Greenie." As he vanished into the kitchen, Paula came in and sat next to me. "What's he doing now?" Shrugging my shoulders, I told her I didn't know. She closed her eyes and crossed her arms, then sighed, leaning back on the couch. We sat there listening to Jack rummaging around in the kitchen till the timer went off on the microwave. A second or two later, he came rushing into the room with 2 metal cups in one hand, a glass of hot water in the other. I wanted to know why he'd started the fight with Arthur, but watching him mix the liquor before setting it on fire was distracting. I was honestly impressed. He poured the steam of flaming liquid back and forth between the 2 metal cups before putting it out, then grabbing 3 glasses from the bar and filling them. I know what you two are thinking. And first off, in my defense, fuck that guy. He's a giant douchebag and I hope I broke his stupid fucking face. But as my peace offering to you two... He paused, stepping back to the bar to grab a bottle of blue curacao. Pouring just enough in each cup to create the blue cloud, he stepped back and smiled. The Blue Screw. My signature drink, guaranteed to put some pep in your step and some pride in your stride. Leaning forward, Paula looked at Jack and picked up her cup. You're still a fud, but thanks for the drink. Jack and I watched her as she sniffed her cup and took a sip. She nodded her head with a slight smirk. Not bad. Taking another sip, she turned to me. So Cal, where'd you hide the gun? Getting up and grabbing my cup off the table, I went to the hall closet. There was no smell coming off the mounds of rotting flesh in there, but that wasn't as disturbing as the banana-sized maggots that twisted and writhed their way through the meat. Gulping down my drink and tossing the door open, I plunged my hand into the mush up to my elbow. I could feel them wriggling and squirming against my skin, 1 or 2 of them taking nips as they passed by. The instant my fingertips touched it, I grabbed it and snatched my arm back. I didn't even look at it. Holding it away from my body, I rushed over and plopped it on the coffee table and then headed to the restroom to wash off the coating of meat pulp off my arm. When I got back, Jack was stomping on the last of the maggots, and Paula had gone to grab a towel from upstairs. Smearing maggot guts with his foot, Jack stopped and gave me a serious look. You know what happens now, don't you? I stood there silent for a second before Jack cracked a smile. We get to tear shit up. He laughed and started making some more drinks. Paula came down a minute or 2 later and stopped in the doorway looking out the window. Has anyone else noticed that the van is still sitting outside? Normally, when an announcement was made, the van would drive off once the timer finished, but today, it hadn't budged. Something about the van seemed like bad news. We all stood there staring at it for a long time before the speaker finally chimed again.
Attention all participants. 71 hours remain. For the next 70 hours, you will not be allowed inside your designated sectors. You have 5 minutes to collect your
Every alarm in the house screamed to life as the lights took on a strobe effect. Jack being Jack, he gulped down his drink, then grabbed a couple of bottles from the bar and stuffed them into his bag before grabbing his rock and heading for the door. Paula and I raced upstairs. I don't know what she was after, but I grabbed my backpack and my smokes before scrambling back to the kitchen to grab as much food as I could. The speaker blared out again.
2 minutes remain.
Rushing for the front door, I grabbed the gun and bullets on the way, meeting up with Paula at the bottom of the stairs. Once we were both outside, the door slammed shut and the alarms went silent. Turning to face Paula and I, Jack smiled and picked his bag up. We better get a move on. If we hustle, we can have camp by nightfall. I had to stop him right there. What? I'm not going in those woods. What's wrong with you? Paula jumped in and agreed. Going into the woods was a bad idea. We argued for a while, and in the end, we chose to stay in the backyard, taking turns going up on the roof to be lookout. Jack's idea. The rest of the day was quiet. By sundown, we had a good fire going, and we were actually having a pretty good time. Jack was on first watch since it was his idea. Paula went second, and I was last, which meant I would be up there till dawn. I was about an hour into my watch and bored out of my mind. I tried everything I could think of to stay occupied, but by the second hour, I was starting to doze off. Rubbing my eyes and adjusting my position, I struggled to stay awake till I started hearing something moving in the darkness. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something quickly turning to get a look. I could have sworn I saw a person. Wake up! Someone's coming! Jack and Paula sprung up and started looking around, but didn't find anyone. For a second, I was starting to think I just imagined it. Then I saw it again. It was Arthur. Before I could yell out, he came charging from the bushes. It was so dark, I couldn't see exactly what he had in his hand, but it was like a club. I aimed, fired, and missed. Then Arthur stopped in his tracks, dropping what turned out to be a human hand and forearm. He put his hands up. Please, you have to help me. They're going to kill my girls. Please. He was panicking, soaked in blood and horrified. Just when I was thinking this might be a trap, I heard screams echoing through the darkness, and Arthur took off running towards the noise. The three of us paused as if we all had the same thought. Fuck them. Jack laughed and lit his joint before taking a seat by the fire, then Paula went back to where she was sleeping, stretching out on her blanket. I don't know if they could hear the screaming, but I could. I listened to it for close to a half an hour before it finally got quiet. Once the air was still and all I could hear was the crackling of the fire and Jack snoring. I dug my cigarettes out of my pocket and sat there for a second, remembering I still didn't have a fucking lighter. I climbed down from the roof and used the fire to light up. Watching the flames dance in the dark, I took a deep drag and found myself mesmerized, or maybe hypnotized. That would be a better description of what I was feeling. An avalanche of old memories rumbled through my mind, and for some reason stopped on an image of my father. He was standing outside the front door of our new house with a big smile on his face. I remember my mother crying and hugging him as he lifted her off the ground, but the thing that stuck with me the most was the number 70 on the door. With tears in her eyes, my mother turned to me and smiled.
Cal, what are you doing? Cal.
Her voice slowly shifted, becoming Paula's, shattering the illusion and snapping me back to reality. The sun was coming up, and the fire was out. I had been standing there for hours, but in my mind, it felt like minutes. Paula gave me an odd look and started picking up her blanket. You've been standing there since I woke up. Jack says you've been standing there for hours. Are you all right? Looking around, I noticed Jack was missing. Where's Jack gone off to? Before she could respond, he came walking out of the bushes, rubbing his stomach. Don't go that way. Hey, Greenie, welcome back to the land of the living. You were starting to freak me out. I thought I was going to have to pop your top for a second. Glad I didn't. I sat down, rubbing my eyes as Jack walked over and grabbed something out of his bag. Paula stretched and started to walk away from the camp. Hey, where are you going? I don't think it's safe to wander around by yourself in there. Aw, that's cute. I should be okay, Cal. Besides, I don't need a bathroom buddy eyeballing me. She smirked and disappeared into the woods. Jack lighting up his joint, he turned and looked at me once she was gone. Hey, Greenie, I was thinking, once this event is over, we should keep the party going. Together, the three of us could walk out of here with a nice chunk of change. There's no rule against us teaming up for the rest of the program. I figure alone, we'd probably all get eliminated. But if we ride it out as a team, we stand a better chance. I hadn't thought about that, but it didn't seem like a bad idea. We agreed to run it by Paula when she came back, but she'd been gone for over an hour, and then we started searching for her. I'm not exactly sure how Jack and I got split up. One moment we were following her trail, and the next I was alone. I tried calling out to him, but there was no response. The further I went into the woods, the darker it got, and after a few minutes, I decided it was best if I headed back to camp. I hadn't made any turns. I was purposely walking in a straight line to make it easier to find my way back, but when I turned around, the path was gone. What the fuck? Jack! Paula! Where are you? I stood there, waiting for a reply, but none came. The woods were dead silent. After a few minutes of screaming like an idiot, I tried to find my way back, only to end up standing by a river. I knew if I kept going, I'd eventually come to some sort of boundary. There had to be a fence or wall marking off the area, but I didn't want to get turned around out there. The last thing I needed was to get eliminated for moving past the designated area. Following the river, I came to a small brick building surrounded with barbed wire fence. There was no one around it, but I couldn't shake the feeling I shouldn't be there. Something splashed in the water behind me, and I jumped. When I turned to get a look, my heart dropped. Arthur was standing there, staring at me. He looked like a zombie. His skin was pale and gray, caked with dried blood and chunks of what I could only guess were the remains of his family. Pulling the pistol from my waistband, I stepped back. Hey, Arthur, are you alright, man? Look, I don't want any trouble, just stay back. He didn't respond. Breathing heavily, he stood there, watching my every move. Keeping my eyes locked on him, I slowly started backing away, and as I did, he finally took a few steps, but when I stopped, he stopped. Look, man, I don't know what your deal is, but if you keep this shit up, Arthur screamed and cut me off as he came rushing towards me. I didn't want to shoot him. Hell, by the look of him, I wasn't sure it would do any good. But as he came splashing through the water, I brought the gun up and fired. He jerked back from the impact and fell in the water, but quickly got up and came rushing at me again. I fired a second shot and missed. I'll kill you, he screamed, closing the distance between us. I was about to fire for a third time when Jack's boulder collided with the side of Arthur's head, dropping him like a bad habit. Holy shit, you're a horrible shot, Greenie. What are you, cross-eyed or something? He strolled over and flipped Arthur onto his back, then dug the stone out of his head. You're going to have to do better than that if you plan on making it out of here in one piece. I'm not sure why, but in that moment I had a flashback of the night where we were trying to nail the mystery door shut. Hey Jack, do you remember that night we were attacked by the Mog? You said you'd forgotten to tell us something. What is it? He shot me a confused look for a second, then smiled. Oh yeah, I was gonna tell you guys I work for the company that built these homes. Well, not these exact ones, but my crew built 40 through 50. And that had to be nearly 20 years ago. Why, what's up, Greenie? I suddenly felt sick to my stomach. A million questions ran through my mind, but I pretended to brush off his words and get back to why we were out there. It's not important. Did you have any luck finding Paula? Jack gave me an odd look and scratched his chin. What the hell are you talking about? When we woke up this morning, you weren't on the roof. We've been out looking for you all day. Paula came jogging up.
Why are we out here, Cal? Don't we have enough problems with you vanishing every couple of days? And what were you shooting at?
She stopped and looked at the bloody body lying near the river.
Oh my God. Is that Arthur? What happened to him?
I pointed at Jack, and Jack pointed at me as we simultaneously responded. He did it. She looked at the body and shook her head.
Not that, you baboons. I mean, why does he look like he's been dead for at least a week or two? We just saw him yesterday. There's no way he should look like that.
I shrugged my shoulders and Jack chuckled as he started back towards the house. Makes about as much sense as anything else around here. It's just flat out fucking weird. Now, can we get the hell out of here? On the walk back, I told them everything. By the time we made it to camp, Paula was telling me what they had gone through while they were looking for me. They'd been attacked by Justine and one of the girls. During the fight, they heard me shooting at Arthur, and the two of them ran away. Jack followed the noise and got to me first, but during the struggle, Paula had been bitten by Justine. The wound on her shoulder was fresh, but it was already starting to look infected. We did what we could to clean it and keep it covered, but by that night, Paula was running a serious fever. I don't know what we're gonna do, Jack. She's getting worse and we still have 2 full days. I'm not sure she can make it. Jack looked over at Paula, asleep by the fire. We got a couple of choices to make here, Greenie. First, we can try to get help, but only one of us can go. The other has to stay here with Paula to keep her safe. The other option is to let her ride it out. There's a chance we're overthinking this whole thing, but I doubt it. I couldn't argue with his logic. If getting bit made her sick, the odds were this wasn't going to end well. Okay, so where do we get help? Whatever's in control clearly doesn't care if we live or die, so who's going to help us? Jack sat there for a second thinking. I guess we have to help ourselves. Maybe we can find something useful in one of the other houses. The rules said we couldn't go back to our designated sectors. They didn't say anything about the others. It was worth a try. Since I was a bad shot, the odds were both of us would end up dead if I stayed to protect Paula, so I volunteered to go on the search. Once I was standing in front of the house, I took a second to look around at the sectors. The closest one was the yellow house. I had instant flashbacks of Glenn and Christine cannibalizing Eli. My stomach hurt just thinking about it. But on the upside, I couldn't recall seeing anything other than the faceless man in there. If Jack could kill one with a rock, I felt confident I could get it done. The sickly, sweet odor of rotten meat ordered my feet to stop dead in their tracks. I wanted to go back, but the thought of letting Paula die or possibly worse got me back into motion. When I got to the front door, I expected it to be locked. To my surprise, it wasn't. Turning the knob, opening it, I was assaulted by the overpowering smell of death. There were dried bloody prints smeared on nearly every wall, and the air was thick with flies. Paula was right. The interior of each house was completely different. The layout was nothing like the green sector. I searched the downstairs for a few minutes and came up empty, but just as I was about to go to the next floor, I heard a door opening ahead of me. I stood there, gun in hand, listening for footsteps or voices, but there was nothing. Just a constant buzzing and the rancid stink of decay. After searching for a few minutes, I found a needle and thread along with peroxide and aspirin. I wasn't sure if it was enough, but I wanted to get the hell out of the yellow sector. Slipping the items into my bag, I headed for the door. I was halfway down the stairs when I saw someone run past the window, and I froze. Justine came rushing in. She darted to the foot of the stairs and stopped. We were just a few feet apart. Her normally well-groomed hair was a tangled mess. Her clothes were torn and bloody, but the worst part was her skin. Like Arthur, she looked as if she had been dead for weeks, with purple lips and glossed-over gray eyes. There was no expression on her face, just an empty gaze that never left me while she stood panting like a winded animal. I pulled the pistol and aimed it at her head, yelling for her to get back, but she didn't respond. "Don't make me shoot you! Get out of my way!" The barrel was just a few inches from her face, but she didn't budge. She didn't even blink. When I tried to step back, she came forward, and I pulled the trigger. Squeezing my eyes shut, I didn't want to look. My ears were ringing, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to faint. Shit. Taking a deep breath, I opened my eyes and tried to walk out without looking. It didn't work. As I stepped out, I turned back and saw her lying there. It wasn't as bloody as I thought it would be. The only part that stuck out in my mind were her eyes. They were still open and locked on me. Out of everything I'd seen, those eyes scared the hell out of me. Something about the blank stare burnt itself into my brain and left me with a memory I'm sure I'll have for the rest of my life. When I made it back to camp, they were gone. Jack! Paula! Damn it! Hey, are you guys out there? I stood there for a few seconds before Jack finally yelled back. Over here! His voice was coming from the tree line just out of sight. I had to laugh once I'd found him. He'd gotten caught in a snare and was dangling upside down from a tree. Holy shit! What happened to you? Oh, don't stand there smiling at me. Cut me down! It took a minute or two to get it worked out, but when it was over, he told me what happened. Man, after you left, she started talking in her sleep. Couldn't make out what she was saying, but when I got close enough to hear it, she popped up and ran into the woods. That girl is fast as shit. I could barely keep up. I almost had her, but I got caught in that stupid-ass trap and then she got away. Her tracks led us back to the river and vanished in the water. Well, Greenie, there's nothing we can do about that one. If she crossed, she's not coming back. Looks like it's the sound of leaves crunching behind us cut him short, and we both turned to see Paula coming out of the woods. Hey guys, what are you doing out here? Jack glanced down at the tracks, then at me. Without saying a word, I understood what he was thinking. Something wasn't right. I looked back to Paula, who was walking towards us. Jack says you took off running. Is everything all right? She rolled her eyes while releasing a sigh. I had an emergency. Needed to use the bathroom. Fudd over there chased me away from the first tree I got to, so I ran deeper in the woods and he gave up. When I was done, I went to the river to clean up, then made my way back, and then I saw you guys standing there. Her version made some sense, but for some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right about her. Once we were back at our camp, Jack stitched up her shoulder and we had a few drinks, topped off with a couple of rounds on the joint. Since Paula was hurt and Jack and I split lookout duties for the night, I did my best to keep an eye on her. There was nothing obviously different about her. She just seemed odd for some reason. But strangest of all, I could have sworn that she had been bitten on her left shoulder. Now, it was on the right.